always talk about what you're doing. Let your network know what you're doing. Make the Facebook posts so people know what you're doing, because I also now get word of mouth deals.
Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Our guest today, Jason Velie. Jason, while working a career in finance, began investing in real estate back in October of 2019 with virtually no money to his name until leaving his six-figure W-2 job only 3.5 years later. Now, Jason's portfolio consists of 59 rental units, 44 by weighted ownership, and 13 active single-family flips with a total equity position of over $3.5 million and passive net rental cash flow of over $10,000 per month. Jason's business model from the beginning has been flipping single-family homes, including the much overlooked asset class of manufactured homes, and holding small commercial multifamily properties. In his free time, Jason enjoys spending time with his wife and 4, soon to be 5 children. So it sounds like you got your hands full. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, stoked to have you here. You're doing a lot of cool stuff. I mean, you've done over 30 deals in just the past 4 years, and that's a lot of action to be taking. We'd love to hear. I think you're doing a lot of things people wish they were doing or want to be doing. So I'm excited you kind of telling them the path of how it worked out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always, had an interest in real estate, but I thought that I would just continue working my finance career and slowly save up money and buy a rental, and then save up more money and buy another. And then maybe when I was, 55, 60 years old, I would have 20 or 30 rentals paid off and be wealthy in retirement.
Sure.
But then about 4.5 years ago or so, somebody that was flipping houses that I met introduced me to a real estate podcast, and I started listening to that, and it just blew my mind that, it was particularly learning about hard money lenders and private money lenders, that the fact that if I just find a good enough deal, that somebody out there will loan me all the money for it, just blew my mind. And that's kind of what opened, what was possible to me. And so I was crazy enough to do it, and I went out there and I found my first flip, and I had no money to my name, but I excuse me, I went and found a hard money lender that loaned me 100% of the purchase and the rehab, even though I had no experience. And I had to bring $8,000 to the table to get it closed for their points and closing costs. So I did a cash advance through my credit card for that. And then for the $10,000 rehab budget, I didn't have that money either. So I bought like the $5,000 worth of materials with the credit card, and then didn't pay the contractor until he was finished and the lender released the $10,000 draw to me. So then I was able to pay him off, pay the $5,000 back off the credit card. And then after we closed on the sale of that flip, paid back the other $8,000 off the credit card. And my net on that first flip, which was a double wide manufactured home, by the way, was a little over $26,000. And to me, that was proof of concept. And
Yeah,
I knew I wanted to do more of that. But the progression from there was really slow. Like you mentioned, over 30 deals in 4 years, but truthfully, all but maybe, 3 or 4 of those deals were within only the last 2 years. It was a really slow start. Like between deal 1 and 2 took me quite a long time. And then between deal 2 and 3 was a little bit less. And then once I got to around deal 4 is really when that exponential growth curve started to happen and things really took off.
Yeah, why is that? We see these hockey stick curves, and like why was it for you specifically that it was so slow at the start, but then just was able to skyrocket?
Yeah, so I'd say a few things. Number one would be just ignorance and education and learning, because
Mm,
the more you learn over time, the more specifically with finding more deals, you learn other ways of marketing, other ways of, instead of just only looking for a wholesaler to maybe give you a chance over their other top buyers. You learn how to market yourself. You learn how to start sending direct mail or cold calling, driving for dollars, whatever. And so your ability to find deals gets better over time. And also, really, once you do a couple of deals, your credibility becomes very, very strong in that, at least in my market, that's not huge, because everybody and their grandma is talking about doing real estate, wants to do real estate, and does all
mm-hmm.
the listens to all the podcasts, takes all this education in, but never does anything with it. So if you're one of the folks that goes to these real estate meetups or is networking with wholesalers in your local, REI Facebook groups, and you're actually doing deals, even if you've only done one or two so far, but you've closed them, you
Mm-hmm.
instantly become more credible. And that's what wholesalers are looking for, people that they can count on to close. And if you become that over time, the deal flow just becomes easier and easier. And now I'm, 4 years in, I have, the only small handful of actually consistent wholesalers that know decent numbers in our market. Most of them bring their deals to me first. And
That's
the
awesome.
a lot of the ones that don't, it maybe they have a buyer that's willing to pay more than me for stick built houses. Those same ones still often bring me all their manufactured home deals first, because their other buyers aren't interested in the manufactured homes. So I still have a lot
Yeah.
of opportunity there. So it just gets easier on time. Everything, your knowledge base compounds over time. It's like the concept of compounded interest. Your knowledge is the same way, your network is the same way, your credibility is the same way. And that's why too it's important to always talk about what you're doing. Let your network know what you're doing. Make the Facebook posts about, oh, just bought this new flip today or just sold this flip today, so people know what you're doing. Because I also now get word of mouth deals, because
Yeah.
ev- your friends and your family, your network, they all eventually are going to know somebody, a friend or family member, that's going through a divorce or is facing foreclosure or what have you. And that is essentially free marketing, so it all compounds and gets easier over time.
Yeah, I love that concept of compounding effectiveness, compounding credibility. Like you said, that's so cool, and it's really true because so much, like I say, there's money out there, there's deals out there, but it's who can you trust more and more, especially in this world of like social media outreach. Like anybody can meet anybody. I message you and now you're on this thing. Like we didn't know each other from Adam. You know what I mean? It's like it's so easy to like get fingers out there in the world now. But the hard thing is like who's legit. You know what I mean? And so if you have somebody in your
Yep.
network that you can like see as legit, boom, that's what means so much more than somebody on Facebook who says they're legit but you don't really know, you know. And so when you can have, like you said, in your network somebody that goes, oh, Jason's the man, maybe he's only done 2 deals, like now you've done tons, but at the beginning it's like, well, he's done 2, that's 2 more than me, it worked, I'll just go with him because I know him. And
Yep.
then it just builds and builds and builds. So I love that compounding credibility. Let's talk a little bit about manufactured homes.
Yeah.
So a big thing with and I've dabbled in that. I've had my fair share of goods and bads with that, and it is a underutilized asset base. But um, let's talk about financeable, okay? Because that's kind of a key element to, especially in flipping. If you want to move this product after you get it all ready to go, if no one can get a loan to buy it, it's going to be really hard to sell it. So what are the key things that you look for to make sure that it is financeable on traditional, conventional terms so that people can buy it? Or is that even something you concern yourself with, or you just look for cash buyers when you flip them? But anyway, I want to talk about the financeability of manufactured homes.
Absolutely. So First, just to clarify for the listeners, you're referring to financeability for the buyer that would be buying it as their primary
Yes,
residence after
correct.
I flip it.
Yep.
And that's important to differentiate because, as I'm sure you know, these types of properties don't make a good candidate for the BRRRR model. The buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. If you wanted to potentially keep it as a rental property, because you can't get investment property loans on these conventionally. So so that's why I only flip them. I don't hold any, as rentals. So to answer your question, what makes them financeable is, they need to be, it needs to come with the piece of land that it's sitting on. So it can't be, in a mobile home park or on rented land. And excuse me. And it needs to be on a permanent foundation, which means that the um, tongue and axles have been removed, which of course means the wheels as well. The home is going to usually be sitting on cinder block piers, and we'll usually have metal straps, tie downs as well. And contrary to popular belief, the skirting around the property, the decorative skirting, which goes from, the outside edge of the house, from the bottom of the house to the ground. Brick skirting is probably the most common. There's also cinder block skirting, and there's also even just vinyl skirting.
Mm-hmm.
The skirting does not support the weight of the building. It's not part of the foundation, and people often confuse that and think that it is part of the foundation, but it's not. And uh, having brick or block skirting is not a qualification. It's not a
You don't need
requirement.
any skirting, really, right? Like you could finance it
You
with no skirting.
You do need skirting, but
Okay.
but vinyl is sufficient. That you have to have skirting just so you keep rodents and stuff out. But vinyl is completely sufficient, and I've seen so many investors and even realtors that think that vinyl skirting will disqualify it from financing. And like when we have one that has vinyl skirting that we flip and we relist for sale, there are so many buyers agents that won't make an offer, or they put in comments or something that says my buyer wouldn't be able to buy it because it wouldn't qualify for financing because of the vinyl skirting. And that's just not true. They just
Yeah,
don't
as
know.
long as it's
So
got that permanent foundation,
right.
then as long as there's some skirting, it'll be fine. The permanent foundation's the bigger part than the skirting. Now, is it true
Right.
that it needs to be a double wide, as it can't be single wide?
No, it can absolutely be a single wide. Yeah,
Okay.
single wides are exactly the same way. So what's supposed to the way that the title search works whenever you go into escrow is that you get the data plate from inside the home, single wide or double wide, and it's a regular full size sheet of paper that's going to be glued onto usually the inside of a kitchen cabinet under the sink, or might be on the wall inside of a bedroom closet, and it has the manufacturer, make, and model, serial number, or if it's a single wide, it'll be probably a VIN number, just like a vehicle. Well, single wides and double wides are considered mobile homes. They're considered vehicles until they're put on a permanent foundation. And then what's supposed to happen whenever they're put on a permanent foundation is whoever puts it on that foundation, which is often the manufacturer of that, home, like, Clayton Homes or Oakwood Homes, what have you. What they're supposed to do when they do that is they're supposed to cancel the title that is in place with the DMV, so there's no longer an
Mm-hmm.
active title. And at least where I'm at in North Carolina, they're supposed to file a form called a declaration of intent to affix to real property, or formally called affidavit of affixation, which is basically just you indicating to the county this property it's no longer a mobile home. The title has been canceled with the DMV, and it's now um, affixed to the property and now considered real property. And thus, you as the county are now allowed to tax this property, tax the building as real property instead of only taxing the land, for the sake of property taxes. But what you find oftentimes whenever you're buying these is that whoever set this up on a permanent foundation 20 or 30 years ago didn't have that stuff done. So you have to make sure that your attorney knows what they're doing, which is why it's important for you to know a little bit about what you're doing. Because I've had a situation where an attorney just assumed I was just buying land. They didn't even know there was a building on there. Not
Oh, geez.
that could have burned me, but luckily it didn't. So you need to make sure that your attorney is taking that information from that data plate and making sure that there's not an active title with the DMV, and making sure that that form has been recorded with the county. And if that's not the case, if the form hasn't been filed and if there is an active title, those are pretty easy things to fix. You can cancel the title pretty easily. They can have the seller sign that form with the county and record it right before they record the new deed at closing. So they're easy fixes as long as you have the data plate. Where you run into an issue is if that stuff hasn't been done in the past and there's no data plate on site because maybe it was in a kitchen cabinet and somebody remodeled and replaced the kitchen cabinets and didn't keep that. There are ways around that to still get the data plate. There's a HUD label on the back side of the siding on the back of the house. If they haven't replaced the siding, that there's a website you can go to that you can type in that HUD label and they're able to generate a new data plate for you and send it to you for a couple $100. So that's one workaround. There's also on some trailers on the actual I-beam frame on the side where the tongue was, in between the frame and the skirting, etched into the frame might be the VIN number. But if you have brick or block skirting there, you only have a couple of inches of space to see. So you might need to get like a little remote camera to look up there to try to get it. And sometimes it's not there and you can't do it. And if there's no prior documentation with the county or the deed or anything that has the manufacturer information, there's no data plate, there's no HUD label, you can't find anything, you're really out of luck. It's not financeable. The other thing that's really important to mention on financeability is the age of the home. So HUD did not start regulating these until 1976. Prior to that, any trailers older than 76 are not going to be financeable, conventional. And when we say conventional, of course, we're talking about regular conventional mortgages, FHA, USDA, VA. All of these single wides and double wides can qualify for any of those types of loan products as a primary residence, as long as these other qualifications are met. But now, even though they are financeable from 1976 forward, I will say that a lot of lenders are leery to finance something quite that old. Most lenders I've talked to have claimed that they won't finance them if they're over 20 years old, but every single one of them breaks that rule all the time. And what I've seen is anything 1990 or newer has no issues at all with getting financing on the back end as primary residence. Anytime you get older, like 76 to 90, that's when you start to have some issues where the lender's being a little more scrupulous, that they may scrutinize the things a little bit more, and they might want to ask if a porch has been permitted, or if the structure has been changed, or if a property's ever been moved. And if a property has been moved from one permanent foundation to a different location on a permanent foundation, that technically disqualifies it from all of those financing options except for VA financing. VA financing is only. Yeah, VA financing will still approve financing if it's been moved, but only once. If it's been moved more than once, VA disqualifies as well. Now, the little,
I didn't know that part, because I ran into an issue with that once. I was just new into real estate, and I tried to figure out all these different things. Okay, permanent foundation, this and that, and I put all this money in, bought it, and then I was gonna try to sell it or refinance it, and they're like, "Oh, but it's been moved. This isn't its original location." And I was like, yeah, what does that matter? And that blew up the whole thing. But maybe there's still a trick I can use because I still have that property with the VA thing. So I didn't know that. But yeah, that's a key thing that I learned the hard way is it needs to be its original location. It can't have been moved from 2 to 3 different places to still get traditional financing. Which we say traditional financing, which is really like the main way to finance it because you're not going to get, DSCR loans on this, investment loans. Like lenders don't want to touch them. The best thing you could hopefully get is maybe some land loan just based off of the land that it's on. But, traditional financing is really the go-to with these. And if you botch that by one of these things, so let's go, I'm going to run through these and you can see if we need to add anything to it. Permanent foundation, after 76, but really after 90 would be better. Single or double wide's okay. But if you need the HUD label and data plate on owned land, in Oklahoma, they call it detitled, is what you were describing, where there's no longer a title. You've made it a real property. And it needs to be its first location, except for the exception if they're doing a VA and it's been moved once. Did we miss anything more we need to add to make sure that the places qualifies for financing?
That's pretty much it. I mean, the one thing I'll say, if you have the data plate, you don't necessarily have to have the HUD label. The
Sure.
HUD label isn't really needed unless the data plate is missing and you need another way to try to find that information.
Cool. I like that. And for those listening, this is vital information. Like I say, I learned the wrong way. I spent a lot of money that is still tied up in projects that I thought I was just playing it safe, buying some cheap mobile homes, not going to cost too much. And I didn't know RE detail this. So if you ever want to play in this world, this is like a masterclass Jason's giving us, like saving you hundreds of hours and tens of thousands of dollars. So anyway, go on. You're saying something. I interrupted.
Yeah. So another important thing to look for just when you're doing your due diligence on these is to know that these manufactured homes that were made in the late 80s through the early 90s, almost all of them were made with polybutylene plumbing. And the way to recognize that when you're walking through a property is just look under the kitchen and bathroom vanities, the sinks, and look at the water supply lines that are coming out of the floor or out of the walls. And if those supply lines are a gray color, there's a really strong probability that it's polybutylene plumbing. And that type of plumbing was banned at some point because they realized that with a little bit of age, that plumbing becomes incredibly brittle and causes a lot of leaks. And every time we buy a property that has that type of plumbing, there's always a few leaks underneath. And you can try to play whack-a-mole and fix those little leaks, but chances are just by touching it, you're going to cause 3 more leaks. And home inspectors know this. So if you just repair a couple of leaks and then go to resell it, which is okay, you don't necessarily have to replumb it. The inspector is going to blow you up on that, and the buyer's going to want you to replumb it anyway. So just factor that into your rehab budget if you see that gray piping coming out of the wall. And for reference, in the area that I'm in, retail plumbers to replumb a whole double wide are going to charge somewhere around $6,000. I've got some cheaper plumbers that will do it for around $3,000, just to give you an idea of what that normally costs. But that's one of those bigger expenses that if you know what to look for and budget for on the front end, it saves you from cutting that out of your bottom line on the back end.
Yeah, that's huge, because plumbing issues with mobile homes are a huge headache. So you'll still flip that. You just replace the whole plumbing system, and you count that in before you tie anything down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if it's gray, it can't stay. Okay, that's the rule. If you go look at the plumbing, and if it's gray, it can't stay, and you're gonna have $3,000 to $6,000 of extra rehab costs on top of whatever else you're doing. So tell us some of the advantages of why even flip mobile homes or manufactured homes or trailers or whatever the heck we want to call them. You know, why, and maybe we could talk about if there's a difference between any of those terms, because modular, manufactured, trailer, mobile. But why flip those as opposed to a normal stick built? And what have been the pros and cons of that?
Yeah. So a couple of the, you know, the most obvious reason that, would be a benefit is the lower cost, the lower barrier to entry, a little bit lower risk because of the lower costs associated. So, if you were doing
Mm-hmm.
your first flip or two and you were a little nervous about, you don't want to go and get a hard money loan for a $500,000 house, but you might be comfortable getting a hard money loan to flip a, $150,000, single wide, you know, that's one advantage. They are also very easy to work on because they're on a crawl space. All of the plumbing is very easily accessible. I mean, like I said, I can get a double wide replumbed for $3,000. How much is that going to cost to replumb a stick built house? God forbid, especially
Right.
if it's on a slab, then you're really talking huge money. So
Yeah.
that's another benefit. But I would say more than anything, and this is going to depend on your market, but at least in my market, there's just a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of manufactured homes around here that are, 15 to 30 years old. A lot of those neighborhoods that were set up with, quarter acre to half acre lots, with, one manufactured home on each lot. And most investors don't want to touch them because they
Mm-hmm.
either are afraid of those few little like title nuances, which honestly, we pretty much just went over all of them. If you know those handful of things, for the most part, you're going to be safe, but the other
And if you
big
don't,
thing,
you could get burned though. And that's the thing is it does scare. That's what I was
yeah,
saying, emphasizing before. I'm like, guys, this is a masterclass. Jason's saying this like, oh, it's no big deal. It's like, but it had scared off, which is great. It scared off dozens and tons of investors because people they're like, oh, I don't know about this thing. I don't know about that. Those are a lot of little nuances that either people have been burned on or they know someone's been burned on. So like, I'm just going to steer clear. But if you listen to what Jason's saying, you learn these little nuances. It opens up a whole new, much lower barrier entry world that you can play in, because it's not complicated if you know it, and if you don't know it though, like everything else, it's like you can really get burned. And so anyway, I just want to emphasize, like, you're saying it so nonchalant, but like those are key things to learn that, like you said, they're not difficult to deal with if you know what to look for. So go back and re-listen to that list I just said and write that down. But okay, if we do XYZ, we'll be good.
yeah. No, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to get into the weeds on that a little bit because I'm going to save the copy of this video as a resource to give
Mm-hmm.
people when they ask me about this because I've had other, podcasts where I've, been able to get into some of this but not quite to that level and it'll
Yeah.
be it'll be really helpful. But the one other thing I do want to add as far as the benefit and as far as less competition goes is that's probably the biggest benefit. There's a lot of opportunity because there's a lot less competition, and
Yeah.
some of that does come from what you mentioned about the potential risks, but more often than not, what I have found is that most real estate investors, even a lot of the ones in my market that have been doing it for decades, don't know that these homes can qualify for regular financing on the back end when you resell it. They think that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to sell it, a single wide on land that I might be able to sell for $160,000. They might be thinking that I'm going to have to sell that to a cash buyer for $70,000 just because they don't know that it's financeable, and if it's not obvious for the listeners, the fact that it's financeable as a primary residence is what makes it so valuable because
Right.
the the older trailers, the 1975 trailer, even if it's beautiful and remodeled and new siding and everything, even if it looks brand new, it can't qualify for financing. Whereas if it could qualify for financing and it might be $160,000 property, you're looking at maybe an $80,000 property in my market.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's where guys go to like, oh, now we're gonna sell or finance it. We're gonna carry the note and
Yep.
do like a rent to own and stuff like that, which is fine if you got it cheap enough. But if you're in it a bunch of money plus a bunch of money for rehab, especially if you got hard money and private money you can't hold on to, it's like it just doesn't make sense to have that kind of money tied up long term on some seller finance. If you're selling it on seller finance, it's just. But yes, if you can get it financeable, then the world opens up to it. It's way more buyers, way more flexibility, way more options, and like I said, a much higher sales price because they can come in with a low barrier to entry. Like say a VA loan, they can come with zero down and
Yep.
a very low mortgage, as opposed to having to come up with $100,000 cash. Like it's not very plausible. Most people with that much cash aren't going to be buying a mobile home. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
let's talk a little bit mobile, modular, manufactured, trailer. Is there any difference?
Yeah. So I would say trailer and mobile home, I would say synonymous. Um, Mobile versus manufactured, I consider that just to be the difference between whenever it's mobile to when you put it on a permanent foundation. And some of this is a little bit arbitrary, but that's my opinion, is that once you have put it on a permanent foundation, it is technically no longer mobile. So I then
Right.
that's when I consider it a manufactured home at that point. Some people may still call a true mobile home a manufactured home just because they don't
Sure.
like the verbiage of mobile home or trailer because it doesn't sound as nice or whatever. Modular is different. Modular is first I'll say manufactured homes, single wides and double wides, they are built entirely off-site, and single wides just in one section, double wides are built in two different sections and then delivered in two pieces and connected on site. But they are built with like a giant steel I-beam underneath, each of those one or two sections. Modular is a little bit different, which I suppose a modular could have a steel beam underneath the foundation, but I don't think they normally do. Modulars are built in sections, and they are delivered to site and they're assembled on site in various different sections. Instead of just one or two pieces connecting together, they're, you might have like all of the walls assembled in a warehouse, or all of the ceiling, trusses or whatever built
Mhm.
off site and then assembled on site. So it's not like a modular isn't like a true stick built home where you're building every single part of it from scratch on site. However, modular is still, in the eyes of and this wasn't the case some 10 years ago or so, but luckily it has changed in recent years. Modular, as far as home values go and as far as how an appraiser views and appraises homes, modulars are now viewed as equivalent quality construction type as a stick built home, whereas manufactured home, mobile home is not. They're not viewed the same. You can't use a stick built home as a comp for manufactured home or vice versa, but now you can absolutely use modular home as a comp for stick built and vice versa.
So if someone's buying a modular home, they can look at it just like a stick built. They don't have to worry about everything we just listed with permanent foundations and D titles and seeing like data plates and all that stuff. None of that applies to a modular home.
Um, uh, for the most part, yes. A modular may still come with a data plate, but not always. It depends. It was
Okay.
it
And it
that
still
that's
obviously needs a permanent foundation, needs to be like a strong, I mean, it would have to have a permanent foundation. That's how they build them, correct?
yeah, yeah. But a modular may have a data plate, but it probably never had a title. But
Right, because it
that's
was never mobile. It was never like it could be like looked at as a vehicle.
right. But that's definitely something you would want to make sure your closing attorney knows what they're doing, so they make sure the title work is good. And of course, uh, obviously, you want to make sure you have title insurance on any property that you buy, and
Yeah.
that'll help protect you as well. But if you're getting a loan, if you're getting a hard money loan on these, they're going to make sure a title search has been done and you have title insurance on the property. And most hard money lenders and private lenders don't lend on these because they don't like the risk involved, or they don't like the concept or risk that if you do poorly or stop paying and they have to take the property back, then they're stuck with the manufactured home on their books that then they have to offload. So a lot of them don't touch them, but don't believe when people tell you you can't get a hard money loan or private loan on manufactured homes. That's absolutely not true. They just haven't made enough phone calls. And I heard somewhere somebody said that the best lender is the next lender, and it's true. That I mean,
It's so true.
if I'm looking for a good lending option for something, whether it's additional private lenders for flip projects or cash out refinance on an apartment building, I will go online. I'll get referrals from other people I know, or brokers, but I'll go online and look through forums and stuff and Google searches, and I'll make a list of 20 or 30 lenders, and I'll call every single one of them and find out what the products are, if they can even do that, if that area is too rural for them or not, what their terms look like, write everything down, cross them out if they're not a potential fit. And then if they are a potential fit, I'll write down what their terms look like and compare them and go from there. So don't ever limit yourself or think that, you don't have options, because they're out there.
Yeah, I've had that experience. I'll talk to a dozen lenders and everybody's no, 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 no. And then I'll come across one that's like, yeah, we could do it if we do XYZ. And I'm like, okay. Like,
Yep.
yeah, you can't take it all at face value. You hit on something I wanted to mention, rural. Let's dive
Mm-hmm.
into that a little bit. Does it matter how rural the location is for these homes? Because I know for investment lenders, it matters a lot. For not just for mobile homes, but for any type of DSCR investment loan, a lot of them don't want to play in the rural areas, these really small towns. Does that matter for traditional financing on these homes?
For traditional financing, it actually may be even better, because uh, a lot of rural areas qualify for USDA financing, which
Mm-hmm.
is also 0% down. But unlike with VA, you don't have to be military to qualify,
Right.
whereas your metro area and suburbs and whatnot, those are not going to qualify for USDA loans. So you probably have even more potential lending options in the rural space when it comes to that. Whereas, like you said, like, with my commercial apartments, those types of lenders absolutely care about, population and, those
Yeah.
type of demographics.
Yeah, man, that's huge. So, real quick, one last piece on the modular. Can you give us an example of what a modular home is versus a mobile home? Like, if someone saw one or was thinking of buying one, how would they know it's modular? Do they seem the same, or are they totally different? And where do like barn dominiums and those type of structures fit into all this?
Yeah, so it absolutely can be hard to tell sometimes. So because they do make modular homes that are shaped exactly like double wides. So
Mm,
you very well might look at a home and say, "Oh, that's a double wide," but then you find out that it's actually a modular. And so I usually in that case I usually assume it's a double wide unless the if the owner tells me that it's modular, or if I can see from a prior listing of that property that it was listed as modular, then I might peek my head under the crawl space and look at it. And if I don't see the big metal I-beams going across the, underneath the floor joist, then I assume that they probably are correct, that it is modular. But there are modulars because modulars can be completely customized. So a perfect example, I live in a modular home that is 2 stories and 3,400 square feet with 6 bedrooms.
Yeah.
If you were looking at that house from the road, you would never think that that's a modular home, but it is. There are companies that manufacture homes like these, and they'll build them in, 4 or 6 or 8 sections, and they may have additional add-ons that you can pay extra money to get another, section of a house added on, another bedroom or what have you. And
Yeah.
so in cases like that, it's not super easy to tell from the outside. But most of the time, not always, most of the time, the prior listing description or categorization of how it was previously listed is usually going to be accurate. Not always, but most of the time.
So where do barn dominiums, tiny homes, these shipping container homes, are these all modular homes, and are they financeable? Like I didn't think like you could get financing on like a shipping container tiny home thing, but maybe I'm wrong. Where do barn dominiums and shipping container and tiny homes fit into this stuff?
Tiny homes they're a little bit unique because they're just like a single wide trailer in the sense that they're mobile typically. They're usually on a trailer. But tiny homes are not yet regulated by HUD, so they can't
Yeah.
approve for those types of financing. I do know somebody that in my area that owns a business that manufactures tiny homes, and they have recently partnered with a lender that will lend for the buyers of these homes in a non-traditional type of loan product. But for
Cool.
traditional financing, I don't think you're going to get them. With the container home stuff, I don't think you're going to get it unless there's a way for you to do it as a new build and be able to do it in a way that everything meets code, and you're just using those shells as the walls instead of 2x4s. Potentially that could be financeable as a stick built
But
home.
not something you've
I don't know.
experienced.
Yeah, I've not done it. And what was the other one you said? Oh, the barn
Barn
dominium.
dominiums.
Um, is isn't that just like a style of build?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I've heard a little bit about them. They kind of come in. They sound kind of like this modular thing where they come in and they kind of build it on site a little bit. But a lot of times they'll have like pre-factored parts of it. It seems. I honestly don't know a ton
Oh,
about
okay.
them, but I've had some people ask me about them, and I've wondered about the financeability of them because you can make these pretty large homes, kind of like what you were describing with your place. So you can get like really custom and pretty large, and I'm like, what's the difference between that and stick build? I don't really know.
Yeah, I think that would qualify as modular if it's, built off site in pieces and, you know, put together on site. But yeah, I do know somebody that's built like a barn dominium style house completely from scratch, like a stick built home. So
Okay.
I wouldn't look at that style of home and just assume that it's modular, but it absolutely could be.
So let's talk a little bit about your home. So you said it's like, it's large, 3,500 square foot, 6 bedrooms, but it's a modular home. Did you have it built or did you find it, or what's the story behind that? And, that I think that's kind of cool to hear.
Yeah, no, I found it. It was on market, and everything else I do is strictly off market. But this was a primary residence, and um, terribly listed, terrible photos, everything, desperate sellers, and we got a great deal on it. And it was listed. It was actually listed incorrectly as a stick-built house, and it should have been listed as a modular. And so I thought, and you wouldn't know looking at the house and the structure unless you saw that data plate. There's no way you would know because the house is built like a tank. I mean, it's 2x6 studs, 12-inch on center, very thick walls. I mean, it is solid. And it wasn't until the appraisal came back that I learned that it was modular, because the appraisal came back and it said construction type modular. Because mind you, also I bought this home, at near the very beginning of my real estate investing journey, so I didn't know much
Right. You
about it
didn't know
at
everything
that
you know
point.
now. Yeah.
Right, but it was already an existing home. It was 16 years old when we bought it, and yeah, it was when the appraisal came back and I saw that the construction type was listed as modular. That's when I realized that it was a modular home. But that's also when I realized that the appraiser did not give any type of price adjustment for that construction type as compared to the stick built comps that he used.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. Did it matter if it's modular? I mean, if you can qualify for the same financing if it's modular as stick built, like, does it even matter if it's modular versus stick built at all?
No.
Like, it's going to be treated the same. It'll be appraised the same. The comps will be the same. The financing's the same. It really doesn't
Yep.
matter. So the key, for listeners, if you go find what somebody thinks is a manufactured home, but it's actually a modular home, that could open up a lot of doors that they might not see the value in because they think, oh, it's a manufactured and might qualify for XYZ.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's a good point. So in that example that I gave earlier of like, a single,
Because some look exactly like it. Yeah.
right. Well, let's say you have a, double wide for on land for, $200,000. Well, if you buy it and it's actually a modular and you didn't know it, it's viewed as a stick built house. You might be able to sell that for 260 now because
Yeah.
it's a stick built house instead of you know, a manufactured home that you thought.
Yeah. That's awesome. Dude, this is good. I don't know if, I mean, obviously you've done so many things besides just, flipping mobile homes. You've used that and leveraged that to buying tons of multifamily stuff. We don't have time to go into everything. Might need to have you come back on, but um, I appreciate you diving into this. And maybe I'm just being selfish, like I said, because I've dealt with some of this. I'm like, man, what are the intricacies? Because I learned the hard way on some of it. But I do think it's an untapped market that is really cool. Like I said, the barrier to entry is lower for a lot of people, and that they can come in with cheaper rehabs, cheaper, purchase prices and things like that. That it's like, and a lot of people just discredit them. And I do. I know I've had phases in my career where I'm done with those, and I just don't even look at them. So there's less competition. I did want to ask you before we dive into our final four questions on our lead out. I wanted to ask you a little bit about weighted ownership. In your bio, we talked about how there, 44 of your 59 units are weighted ownership. Can you explain what that is and how that's advantageous to you?
Yes, thank you for asking, because what really frustrates me in the real estate world, the education world, all the gurus out there, is
Mm-hmm.
when you have these. It's not all of them, but oftentimes apartment syndicators that might own 3% ownership of, you know, 1,200 apartment doors, which is great. That's still way more than most people in America. But they will go around all over social media saying they own
Mm-hmm. I own
1,200 doors.
1,200 doors.
And
Whoa.
I'm just like, no, like, be on, like, if you want to say I have 1,200 doors under management, that's fine. Or
Sure.
I'm a general partner on 1,200 doors. That's more transparent. That's more honest. But I mean, I don't care like what people want to do for the sake of ego. That's their business. But I just don't like it in the sense of if you're trying to if you're misleading anybody for the sake of education or selling something, making it to try to look something better than it is, that's where it bothers me. So, all that being said, of those 59 doors, which actually it's going to be 60 now because we're in the process of changing one big unit into two smaller units. Um,
Oh, nice.
so those 60 doors are made up of four different complexes: an 8 unit that I own completely by myself, a 16 unit that I own completely by myself, another 16 unit that I have a 50-50 partner with, and a 20 unit that I own 65% of and have a 35% partner of. So obviously for those where I have a 50% partner and a 35% partner, I don't own that entire 16 and 20 units, you know? So it's not fair or accurate for me to say I own 60 rental doors when I don't. By ownership percentage, I only own 45 of those 60 doors. And I'm a huge advocate for transparency in this
Yeah.
space and setting realistic expectations with people.
I love that. I think it does such a disservice to everybody when people try to fluff things because it adds confusion. These deals you have, these weighted ownership, are these like joint ventures then, or any of them syndications?
Yeah, so the 8 unit and the 16 unit that I own by myself are obviously just, by myself. Um,
Yeah, you just own
the
those ones.
the 16 unit that's 50-50, that's just a joint venture between
Just the
me.
two of you. Yeah.
Yeah, me and a good friend of mine that is actually a wholesaler that he found the deal. And then we went 50-50 on the down payment. That one we actually got seller financed with absurdly ridiculous terms. And
That's awesome.
the the 20 unit that's 65-35 is just a separate LLC that's a joint venture with me, and that same guy is the same partner on that one. So
Love it.
for two of the complexes, no partners. For those other two, partial
Yep.
partners. And for my house flipping business, I own that entirely on my own. No partners, no employees, no investors, just private
Nice.
lenders and contractors. And I have property managers
I
for all of the apartments too, so I don't have
mm.
to I don't have to take my time managing all that.
That's key. No, that's awesome. And one thing, I'm the same way. I have a big aversion to people just fluffing like, oh, I own 1,200 doors, and it's like just call it what it is. But another thing it does is it discourages some people because they're like, oh, that's 1,200 doors. Like, how's that possible? Like, explain how it's possible. Because you're a 3% owner in a syndication. Like, that's cool. Like advertise that so that other people can do that same thing, and not make you think you're something that you're not. But so I love that you're so transparent with that. But that's super cool and very impressive. And again, it's like, oh well, how did Jason get to 59 doors? It's like, well, he got to 59 units because he did a couple creative joint ventures. Oh, that's an option for me to get there. You know what I mean? Like it's an education and it's an inspiration to learn how you really did it. So I appreciate you, pointing that out in your bio so that we could actually dive into it. So this is great, man. There's so much to cover. Obviously, we can't cover everything. This has been a masterclass on mobile home stuff, which will be priceless to those that want to, dabble in that space. We're going to roll into our final 4 questions, but is there anything else you wanted to share for the listeners? And what's a good way for people to reach out to you, follow you, be inspired by you, maybe partner with you, lend you money for, whatever, where they can, be a part of what you're doing? How would they get in touch and follow you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can, if you just want to stay up to date on what I'm doing and maybe occasionally learn a thing or two, you can follow me on Instagram. If you had any interest in partnering, whether that means being a private lender on flips that are collateralized by the properties, or potentially equity partner in future multifamily deals, if I come across a big enough deal where I need more equity partners. If any of that interests you, you can go to jvwithjv.com and submit your information in there, and then I'll get back to you.
I love that URL, by the way. I love that. Joint venture with Jason V.
I just bought
JV
it
with JV.
a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
That's money. JV with JV. I was like, I like that. All right, sweet man. We're gonna roll into our final 4 questions, and then we'll let you go. What is a dream deal or deal you would hope to be able to tackle someday?
I I think the next thing that I would like to do is if I could find, something much larger, like a great deal on, say, like a 60 or 80 unit property that is preferably within a couple hours of where I live, that needs a lot of work. Maybe every unit needs to be renovated. I've got the construction teams that can handle that type of thing. If I could get some great deal where I, wouldn't need to raise much capital, and or if any, depending on my liquidity at the time, and then have huge upside in the value add, I think that would be fun. I also, more so just because the sake that I would like to have one. I think I live near the beach. If I could eventually come across a great deal on a beach house nearby that is either good enough deal that I could burr and hold on to it, or a great seller financing deal, lower down payment or great terms, something like that. I've come pretty close to a few of those deals, but for some reason or another, they never came to fruition. But yeah, truthfully, I'm not somebody that, I don't have these huge goals and aspirations to take over the world. I'm about fun growth. I'm about light growth, not burdensome growth. And to me, if I come across something that I don't like to do, I immediately find a way to not have to do it anymore. Because
I love that.
Because if I don't, it's going to wear me down. It's going to burn me out. And these past 4 years, I've just been having fun. I've had the time of my life doing this and having a blast. And if I do that, or if I set these specific goals, or if I do what everybody else says I should do, and wake up at 4:30 a.m. and do a cold plunge and do CrossFit and set all these KPIs for myself that I force myself to track every day, I would be miserable. That's just not the right lifestyle for me. And I just form my business and my growth slowly and progressively at a pace that's fun and manageable for me, while still allowing me to, for the sake of my family, to never have to work evenings or weekends.
Well, and that's something so awesome about real estate, is you can customize it to your preferred lifestyle. And I love that you're like, I'm not going to get too carried away to when I don't enjoy my life. The whole point is to enjoy my life. And so I'm going to design it around the systems that I'm getting what I need, but I'm still enjoying my life. So I love that concept. All right, Jason, what is one of the most pivotal books you've ever read?
Outside of the Bible, of course, I would say The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. It's not a real estate book. It's I guess it is a business book, but it's a very short book, quick, easy read. But it tells a fictional story that is fun to read, but the concepts in it are just really about having an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mindset, and helping people out, and instead of being a go-getter, being a go-giver. And the concept of how, the more you help people and the more you give, the more just naturally comes back to you without having to try. And that's been so incredibly true in my experience that I help as much as I can and give as much as I can, and it just comes back.
I love that. Yeah, that's a gem. I love that. Thanks for the recommendation. All right, question number 3, Jason. What's one of the most expensive or interesting mistakes you've made in real estate investing?
That would be the first house that I tried to buy as a rental. Well, I bought it, but I I wanted it to be a rental. I didn't know what I was looking at construction wise. I didn't know how to inspect a home. I thought I was safe because I hired a property inspector, but I was an idiot and hired the cheapest flat rate home inspector that only charged $300 per inspection, regardless of the size of the home. And he missed everything that he should have found. He missed that there was
Mm,
mold all inside of the kitchen cabinets and it was rotting out. And he missed that the entire roof had to be replaced and that the floor joists were eaten up with termites. And then to, add to that punishment, that first contractor that I tried out ended up ripping me off for a total of 16 grand. So
jeez.
between those two things, I ended up the way I bought it. So I took a 401k loan to get 15% down to do a 15% down investment property loan. So it was a super cheap house, like 60 grand. So my mortgage PITI was only $350 a month. So I knew I could
Nice.
cover that if I had to, if anything went wrong. And I'm glad I did because I did have to cover that for quite a while. And I held that and paid that mortgage on a vacant home for about 2 years until I
Oh,
finally had
wow.
enough money to put into it to fix it the rest of the way to get it sold. And I should have netted a loss on that. But because, as we know, real estate is forgiving with time, over those 2 years, the value of that property went up from somewhere around 90,000 to, around 120, 125. So
Mm.
really the market helped save me from losing money. And at the end of the day, after all that, I probably came somewhere to around break even.
Yeah, that which is so crazy. I mean, even holding it for 2 years, like once you're able to sell, you still recouped, all or most, if not even a little bit of profit. Which again, like I said, real estate can be so forgiving in so many ways because so many things went wrong there. But like you didn't lose your shirt on it,
Yep.
which is so cool because a lot of other business ventures, if things go south, like you're done.
Right.
You know, you buy a stock that the big company goes out of business, like it's worth zero now. Bye bye. There's nothing you can't wait 2 years and then get it out,
Right.
successfully. So that's super cool.
But I could
All
have
right,
lost
last
my
question.
shirt. And
You could have.
I think that's why it's important to note that I planned for that ahead of time, that if everything went wrong, I would be able to
Yeah.
float that mortgage payment, so that my family was protected. And I think that's important for, the listeners to keep in mind that if you're getting into your first deal, first of all, take somebody experienced with you to walk the property. Take somebody like me. Don't just do it by yourself. But secondly, make sure that you're looking at worst case scenario. Can you float the bill if you have to be safe? And if you can't, then don't do it.
Absolutely. I love that. And one of my number one rules of real estate investing is don't lose your assets. Like we want to collect as many assets as we can, but don't lose them. So you got to look at these ways of, what's your exit strategy? How could you be burned? Can you hold it long enough? Like you don't want to be forced to fire sell something and that's how you lose money. And then at the end of the day, you also don't have the asset to grow your portfolio and hit your goals. So
Yep.
um I love it, man. All right. Well, we'll let you go. We have one last question. Give us your thoughts on the purpose of life, and then we'll let you out of here.
Oh man, what a question.
It's just an easy,
uh,
base hit at the end.
no, for me, I'm a man of faith, and my entire, well, not entire, but my personal calling in life is to be successful in business so that I can be radically generous. And One of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 9:11, that it says something to the extent of, you will be enriched so that you can be generous on every occasion, so that your
Mm,
generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. And I find it a huge blessing to be in a position where I am able to be a blessing to others and to be used to be an answer to prayer, rather than just saying that I'll pray for them. And as much fun and joy as I get out of real estate investing, and I love it with everything in me, it doesn't even hold a candle to the joy that comes with being able to give generously and impact people, when it's put on your heart to do so.
that's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. And if you've given generously on this podcast, I'm excited for this one. I took more notes on this than I typically do. Learned a lot. So I appreciate your time and for being on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Yeah, this is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to get creative, be smart, and make some moves.